Alright, so the other day my girlfriend really wanted to show me this show on HBO. It's called Animals, and that shit is fucking funny.
Yeah, it'll be great.
What?
I figured we were going to the bathroom together.
Oh my god!
Okay.
I want everyone at this party, everyone.
No.
This
Don't make it an out.
guy is a pervert.
No, I'm not.
He is a sick, disgusting deviant
It's
who
fine.
wants
I
to
didn't mean-
stand and watch us go to the bathroom and stroke himself like a fucking maniac. He's the reason
stop it.
I started
Please
hating
stop
men,
yelling at
and
me.
now I loathe this guy.
So we forgot to cancel his subscription by the time the trial period ended, and now here we are, a month of HBO, so we might as well see what they got. Now I remember wanting to see Chernobyl, but I didn't have a subscription to HBO at the time. So I finally decided to check it out, and holy shit, that show is fucking great. The sound effects, the storyline, the cinematography, just everything about that show is fucking fantastic. 10/10 would recommend. And today, when I was trying to think of what I would do as a tutorial, I decided, well, why don't we go ahead and revisit how to make drums? What if I sample some of the sound effects from Chernobyl and turn them into drums? So here we are, part 2, how to make drums in Ableton. Just make sure you stay to the end so you can find out how you can download these drums, as well as a special giveaway announcement. Let's go. I went ahead and ripped the source audio from the trailer, then went through and cut out the pieces that I want, and kind of picked where I felt like they would fit best. So today, like as I was saying, we're gonna go ahead and create some drums. So first off, we're gonna start with our kick. Normally with a kick, you have a initial transient, then you have the body, and then that follows with the tail. How long those particular things are and what they sound like will really depend on the kind of music you're making. But let's just go ahead and make a simple kick. So for the kick, I went ahead and kind of arranged 3 different samples. A lot of the different instruments, we're gonna have more than one sample. That way we can layer it and it sounds really nice. But what I have right here is I have this sample, I have this sample, and I have this sample. So let's start with the first sample. And what we really want from this is ultimately that transient. So the very initial sound and impact of it. We want the sample to be really, really low. So we're gonna go ahead and pitch it down. I went ahead and added an EQ8, chopped off some of the low end, and then ducked some of the high end, as well as a saturator, boosting the drive and adding a soft clip. I'm gonna go ahead and leave it the way it is right now, and come back to it after I go ahead and build some of the rest of this drum. So as I was working this last one, I actually really like how low it is, and I don't really necessarily like this middle kick, and I may or may not stick with this top kick, so I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of this middle kick and just really focus my attention and energy onto the first one and the third one. All right, so what I went ahead and did was I just boosted the low end of that second sample up a little bit. I kind of carved away a little bit of the mid and then boosted a little bit of up here in the upper register. I added a saturator. I kept it at analog clip because the other one sounded a bit too like almost hard styley. Put on a soft clip to go ahead and soften any of the clipping. Really slammed the compressor and then dropped this Ableton tool called Drum Bus. Went ahead, didn't really put any dry, put a little bit of crunch, cut a little of the transient off because this is not gonna be our transient, a little bit of boom. So now I'm gonna go ahead and work on trying to blend these 2 samples together. What I ended up doing is adding a little more overdrive, adding a little more saturation, as well as some EQ, really cutting off that low end, and then tossing on a glue compressor. So this is what it ends up sounding like with the 2 samples together. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to our second instrument, the snare. My plan is to probably have 2 different snare sounds.
Atom.
So as you could hear, actually one of these samples is someone saying atom.
Atom.
But I think that sound will make a really good transient snare sound. So we're gonna go ahead and start with this first sample and see what comes of it. Usually the first thing I do to a lot of these samples is I really shorten them down. Another super important thing and useful tool, at least with snares I've found, is to use a reverb. So I went ahead and added an EQ. I cut the low quite a bit, as well as boosted the high just a little bit. Added a saturator, pushed the drive a little bit, added a soft clip on, as well as a reverb. The decay time isn't super high, but I cut the high input frequency a little bit and pulled back the dry wet, as well as kind of topped it off with an overdrive. I'm gonna go ahead and freeze, flatten, and apply the sample. So what I went ahead and did was I really cut back this the sample after processing the effects, and then topped it off with a saturator. This really makes it into a short snare with that kind of has a little bit of a crunch on the top end, but is also a little hollow. And sometimes I like to add a reverb on the end just to kind of hear what it would end up sounding like with a reverb to kind of think ahead. And that's got a really nice sound when I add that reverb. Okay, as you can see, we actually did quite a bit here. We added an EQ8. This really cut off the low end that existed there. I don't know if you could see it. There was a little bit of a low end there. This overdrive kind of pushed some more harmonics into the this kind of middle register. And then I popped on a saturator, boosted it only slightly, a little bit. Mostly we're using it for the soft clip. I really like what the soft clip does to it. And then I went ahead and put on a reverb. I wanted to have that kind of that wide, big sound, and I think the reverb really helps with that. Now, this is a little unorthodox, but I went ahead and applied a glue compressor right after the reverb. And from my understanding, what this ends up doing is it kind of squashes the sound, so that way the tail that would have been from the reverb that would have been a lot quieter kind of gets equalized, and I really let the release to be quite long. So it's a really short attack, so that way it initially hits, but the release, the compressor holds a lot longer. Then I went ahead and overdrove that sound and topped it off with an EQ8 that I carved the low end, which was still there a little bit, as well as pop it on a drum bus, which I think helped me add a little bit back some of those transients that I felt like were missing. And this is what it ends up sounding like. So after I froze the sample, I went ahead and got rid of a lot of the long tail that was already there, as well as kind of trimmed the front a little bit. I wasn't super happy with kind of that initial hit, and I wanted to make that initial transient to be a little bit into it a little bit more. So moving on to Atom. We really don't want this this sound here at the end. We just want Atom. And actually, we don't even really want Atom. We just want A. Now this is again gonna basically get the same processing as we did earlier. So we did a lot of processing. I'm still not quite happy with it. It was definitely not as easy as I thought it would be. Anyway, so I applied an EQ8, cut the lows, saturator, boosted the drive, but switched it to a sinoid fold.
English, mother! Do you speak it?
Adjusted the parameters here a little bit. Added some overdrive, glue compression, a redux, which is basically a bit crusher, drum bus, a little bit of vinyl distortion, and then some reverb. Now I'm gonna switch this sinoid fold a little bit. Yeah, so I'm gonna switch it to analog clip, I think. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and freeze and flatten. So after freezing and flattening, I actually added a reverb, then dropped an overdrive and a saturator on after it, and I kind of like what that sounds like, because I wasn't super happy with where it was at. So I applied a little bit of more reverb and saturation and kind of messed around with it back and forth, and kind of came out with something like this. And, you know, it's an interesting sounding snare, but, you know, I think it'll work. And that's just shortened down from this. I think that'll produce some nice tones once we apply some reverb as we write the beat. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to the hat. All right, so moving on to the hat. I only have one sample for it, so hopefully this will be nice, quick, and easy. It already has that that hat sound, and so we're just going to make some slight adjustments here and there, probably boost some sounds, add some saturation like we normally do to just kind of like bring out the sounds and really make them strong. So this is what it sounds like. So we're just going to go ahead and find that tss sound. Now there's a little bit of tone kind of hiding in there, so we're going to go ahead and try to figure out how we can either mask it or remove it. All right, so lucky for us, that tone was down here in the lower register. So as we use the EQ to cut out the lower end, it actually removed that tone almost entirely. Then I dropped an overdrive, some saturator, of course, but this time we cut the saturation a little bit. I really like those, the kind of the sound from the hats, and then of course some erosion, and this is what it sounds like. So now we're gonna go ahead and do a ride. Now, whether or not this ride is actually gonna be used in the groove, I'll decide later once I hear all the sounds together. So this is the sample. It does sound very much like a darker reverby crash, but I'm gonna go ahead and try to turn it into a ride. All right, so I think that actually sounds kind of like a ride. It's kind of like a ride crash. So I guess we'll see how we end up using it. But this is what it sounds like. Yeah, I'm really not good at rides. And finally, we're gonna go ahead and work on our crash. So this is a sample we're messing with. I think it's honestly kind of similar to the hat where a lot of it's already there. One thing I know about crashes is these do tend to have some strong reverb and a bit of tail kind of on them. There are obviously some like splash crashes or just like really tight crashes. But for the most part, these crashes tend to ring. So what I went ahead and did was I added an EQ8, really cut off the low, very similar to the other stuff that we've done in this episode so far. Really kind of boosted the saturator quite a bit, but also cut the output, added an overdrive, a drum bus, a little bit of chorus, as well as that reverb to give it its tail. So this is definitely a very dark crash. We'll go ahead and boost this audio a bit. But yeah, very dark crash, but I think we're gonna go ahead and keep it the way it is. Maybe give it some adjustments later. So we'll probably go ahead and leave this now the way it is. I added a phaser to it and pulled back that end. I know that I'm gonna add reverb to this once it gets put into the context of the rest of the drums. All right, so we finished doing the initial processing of our drums. Obviously, moving forward, we'll do some mixing while we kind of create the groove and add the loop for the instrumental on. Probably won't get covered and talked about too much in this video, but it's typical mixing stuff, panning, cutting some stuff here and there, making stuff fit ultimately. But if you forgot what our samples sound like, here's what it sounds like. Here is the kick we came up with. Here's the first snare, second snare, third snare, or rim, ride, crash, and the hat. And honestly, I think these samples all sound really good together. They're all kind of dark and moody. It makes sense coming from Chernobyl. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and come up with a beat, throw it in an instrumental, and we'll be good to go. All right, so for the sake of time, I went ahead and used a trick that I demonstrated in a previous video where I created a groove in Logic and then exported the MIDI into Ableton. So after that, I went ahead and pulled a loop from Cymatics, and then I went ahead and split the MIDI between the kick, the snare, the second snare, the hat, and the crash, just so that way they're all on their separate track, and I can go ahead and mix it a little bit better. But I did end up adjusting the snare a little bit, and then I also ended up trimming them a little bit tighter, just for the sake of this little loop we're creating here. For the hat, I really tightened it up. I cut off, there's a little front end that I cut off, dropped a chorus on it, and auto panned it just to give it a little bit of movement. So I also added a little bit of reverb. I went ahead, let me get rid of this. I went ahead and added some an ambient reverb, as well as side chaining. I side chained the instrumental here to both the kick and the snare, just to allow things to punch through. I also went ahead and added a reverb, a little ambient reverb that I could send these instruments, specifically, the snares and the hat and a little bit of the crash, to, as well as this rectifier send, which just adds a little bit of extra edge to the sound and lets them kind of cut through. But there you have it, how to make drums part 2. As always, you can check out the rest of our tutorials with more tips and tricks on how to make music. We release one every week. If you want to stay updated, subscribe, ring that notification bell. If you like this tutorial, hit that like button. Follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the social media. Join our Discord. It's still really small. We're trying to build it so we can go ahead and provide you more content. If you like what we have here, support us on Patreon. If you like these drums, I'm giving them away royalty free. All you got to do is join the Discord server. The link is in the description below. Now, as I said in the beginning, we're doing a special giveaway. All you have to do is like this video, subscribe to this channel, and at the end of August, we're gonna go ahead and shout out the winner. You can be entered into the giveaway a maximum of 6 times by liking the last 2 videos, commenting on the last 2 videos, commenting on this video, liking this video, and commenting on the next 3 videos that we release. Then on the last week of August, we're gonna go ahead and shout out the winner. And if you wanna know more about the giveaway, all the information is in the description below. And if you're the winner, you'll either win an Akai controller or you'll win a Focusrite interface. It'll be your decision. So that about wraps it up. If you have an HBO subscription, you should really check out Chernobyl. Awesome show, and we'll see you next week.